Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. This is where top performers share their secrets to help you achieve your personal and professional goals. And I am your host, Denise Griffitts. And today with my incredible guest, we will bring you inspiring and actionable insights to take your life and business to the next level. Your Partner in Success Radio is ranked in the top 2% of the most popular podcasts globally, which in my opinion makes this a must listen. So let's dive in. And my guest today is Rob Tribken. He is a seasoned entrepreneur and theologian. So we're going to discover how his extensive business experience and theological studies led him to establish the Center for Faith and Enterprise, CFE for short. And through CFE, he aims to bridge the gap between faith and business, helping individuals find purpose and fulfillment in their work lives. And with academic credentials from Harvard Business School and Fuller Theological Seminary, Rob incorporates positive organizational psychology into his work. And he joins us today to share his insights on spiritual practices, faith work connections, business as a calling, that's important, and the vital role of business in addressing poverty. We will also delve into his involvement with nonprofit organizations that are focused on the intersection of faith and work. Rob, good morning. Welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio, and thank you for sending me your book.
Well, thank you, Denise, and thank you for having me this morning. I've really been looking forward to it. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. The book, just so the audience knows, is titled The Sacred Meaning of Everyday Work, Engage Problems and Opportunities with a New Sense of Purpose. And just so anybody who's listened, this is not going to be about religion at all. This is about how you focus with faith or with spirituality. We're not talking about organized religion at all. We're just talking about how we operate from the heart, I think. So, Rob, do me a favor, and I probably missed a lot of really important things when I was introducing you. Excuse me. Tell the audience a bit about yourself that you think is important.
Sure. I've been in business for more than 4 decades. Dealing with all the kinds of problems we deal with in business and in the workplace. I became interested. I became more religious and more interested in spiritual matters 10 years ago or so, and I started shifting my focus a bit. I became particularly interested in issues of the purpose and meaning of our work. For all my life, really, I've been a strong believer in entrepreneurship, markets, the contribution business makes to society, and more and more I wanted to talk about that and find its connection with our faith or spirituality. By the way, when I talk about our faith or spirituality, I like to say your own faith or spirituality. The point isn't to get people to believe what I believe. It's to
exactly. And we all operate our own way. I'm deeply spiritual. I don't believe in organized religion. Mm-hmm. So there you have it.
Yeah, I'm engaged in organized religion, but that's really not my point. And so, should I say a few words about the book?
Yes, please.
Because it follows on what I was saying, what we were talking about. Meaning and purpose is important, I think, for a lot of people. It's a key issue, especially in our work lives. And as I thought about it, I've come to the position that I think most of us, or at least many of us, have what I think of as 2 deep intuitive desires. One is to connect with something deeper than ourselves or larger than ourselves. People talk about that in in a lot of different ways. For a lot of people, having more of an awareness of God as they go through their work lives, their work week. But of course, there are other ways to talk about it. But there's also a strong desire to contribute to the greater good and the well-being of other people through our work. And I think that's important too. And I think these kind of work together. And they may be subconscious most of the time. I think they probably are, but they're still important drivers in our search for meaning and purpose, I think. Part of the purpose of the book is to point out how one's own faith or spirituality can help us think about this and contribute to the process. So I talk about that. I talk about what I think the search for sacred means, what I think how we might think about spirituality. But they also extend it into a number of business and workplace issues like dealing with stress and conflict, burnout, things of that sort. And then how do we develop character strengths that help us through? So I try as hard as I can to apply it to specific business and workplace issues.
Well, and I'm glad you said that. I'm actually on page 64, and you just mentioned, in a roundabout way, work-related burnout. That's a big thing, no matter where you are, whatever you're doing. You may be the CEO, you may be the janitor, you may be something in between, but we do get burned out. Like, I'm a solopreneur. I work for myself. Most of the time I like my boss. Other days I could smack her in the head. And I have been known to bang my head against my computer. So there is that. But I think we all have work-related burnout. But I guess my question here, because I'm reading this, you say work-related burnout is a big problem. I'm thinking that you have ways for us to say, this doesn't have to be a permanent thing. Do you have any case studies where you've dealt with people who would just hang their heads and say, I can't take it anymore?
Not case studies I'd be willing to share. I can talk a little more about burnout, though. And by the way, I try to give credit to people. I borrow heavily on Christina Maslach's work on burnout. She's done a lot of the really, really important work. Burnout, sometimes we just get tired. We work too hard for too long and we're just tired, and what we really need is a rest or some time off and that sort of thing. Burnout is really a deeper phenomenon. When we're burned out, we lose our sense of connection with what we're doing and with other people. Things just don't have any meaning for us anymore. We're chronically exhausted in a way that rest really doesn't help us. And we lose our sense that we're capable of accomplishing anything. We just don't feel effective anymore. And it generally results from what I think of as a disconnect or a mismatch between ourselves and our work. And this is the important thing. Watching for these mismatches are important. A mismatch might be we just don't feel capable of doing the work we've been given. Either there's too much, or it's beyond our skill. We think it's beyond our skill level, and that just keeps going on and on. It might be an interpersonal conflict. There are people that we just can't get along with, or we can't get along with our boss. We may be doing something that doesn't seem to fit with our values. Or it might be a situation where we've given the job everything we can, and we just don't seem to be recognized for it or rewarded for it or really appreciated. That's the key thing, appreciated for it. And any one of these things, any one of these mismatches can just grind us down, keep the stress high, grind us down until eventually we burn out. And sometimes that's an organizational issue. A lot of people think it's a matter of organizational fit and that sort of thing, though it can also be our own personal situations that we do have some control over. But the key thing is to watch for these things, watch for these mismatches, these disconnections, and see if you can't try to do something about them before it gets to the point where you're burned out. Catching it early is just so important. And as as employers, if we have some control over the organization, it's important to watch for where our employees and coworkers might be at risk of burnout. So I think that there's spiritual issues involved. I mean, I think things like prayer and community and those kinds of things can buffer us from some of these stresses. But it's really watching for these mismatches is really the key, I think.
And that does make sense. I mean, if you look, I'm unemployable. I went back to school, got a computer science degree, started my own business, and I am literally unemployable. I don't play well with others. I run with scissors, and I will not get your coffee. Don't ask. So I have to work for myself. But I'll tell you who my worst critic is. I'm pointing at her. It's me. And sometimes I have to sit down and say, Denise, you don't like this work anymore. You've done it for a decade now. So then I have to go, why is it bothering me? What is it? Am I just good and sick of it? Have I gotten so good at it that there's no challenge? Or is it just it doesn't suit my soul anymore? Which, as it turns out, happens to be the biggest thing. Once I sit down and go, what's going on? I mean, you're capable, you're doing the work, you can knock it out in your sleep. Why do you hate it? And it turns out that it's no longer part of my spiritual room. I don't even know if that's right, but I've got a section in me that says this is good and this is not so good. And if it's not in the good area, I tend to dump it sooner or later.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think there are a couple of things. I also think it's important to recognize that some people can't change jobs.
Right.
And for one reason or another, they can't change. And by the way, I never offer any advice about whether or not somebody should change jobs or I just don't know. From the outside, you just don't know the situation. But there are a couple of things in that case. I think if somebody is working just for the money that it provides, then it's important to keep in mind why that money is important to you. Okay, and it may be that this is the right thing for you to do. Maybe your work is helping take care of your family, providing long-term financial security, providing the resources to do something else in your spare time. I think we need to recognize that. But even when we do that, I think it's important for people to be able to find really some meaning in their work, which usually translates to how is my work contributing to the well-being of other people. And most jobs, I would say almost all jobs, do make a contribution. I mean, that's why we're paid after all. And it's important to find that contribution we're making. Even if we're not happy with the work, at least we can see what we're contributing, or we can help other people see what they're contributing. And I think that's just so important in the way we approach these things.
It is. So basically, you're saying if you're in a job that you just really despise for whatever reason or reasons, but you do have these, things that you need to provide for your family, you have solid reasons to stay in that job. What I'm hearing you say is sit down and take a look at what your contributions are, but reframe your thinking. Just reframe it. Instead, oh my God, I don't want to go to work today, but let's see, what can I bring to the table today? How can I be of assistance? Yeah.
Some people talk about job crafting, and the idea there is, as you say, you reframe it. What's the contribution I'm making? Maybe there's another way to think about that contribution or what I'm doing. Maybe there's a way of making adjustments in how I spend my time, and that can be very important. I don't want to go too far on that, but I think it's important to recognize that people can be in that situation, and there are some things they might be able to that might help them.
What is job crafting? I'm not sure I've heard of that before.
It's reframing the way you define your work, your job to yourself. for example, if you're a salesperson, you might think of yourself as trying to get people to buy what you're selling, for example, and hitting your sales targets and making money, earning your commissions and making money for the company. Or you might see it as providing support and service that helps particular customers meet their needs. Okay, what's the benefit I'm providing to the customer? How am I helping them? How am I helping them solve a problem? And that's much different than thinking in terms of just the commissions and the meeting your sales targets.
It really is, and I speak with a lot of salespeople and people who are very aware of mindfulness and how they assist other people. And a conversation I had just the other day with my friend Ben Gay III, who is a very well-known salesperson. In fact, he's known as a living legend. And he has said and will always say that as a salesperson, your job literally is to make sure that whatever you're selling or offering, whatever service, that it actually is good for them. It actually gives them what they need. Otherwise, find a different job. Go, and he uses the Yugo. He's talking about, I didn't even know Yugo was still around, but after he was through with this one thing, he told all the Yugo people in the room to quit their jobs and go find a job where they weren't ashamed and where they did feel like they were actually serving their customers. And that makes perfect sense to me.
And that's also, as you pointed out, that's a key to sales. I mean, that's I used to tell people that sales is the most difficult thing in the world, and it's the easiest thing in the world. And if your goal is to get somebody to buy something you're selling, then it can be really difficult. If you think of your job as trying to provide what someone's looking for, then it can be a lot easier. Not always, of course.
Exactly.
It can be.
Trying to sell something to somebody who doesn't need it, doesn't want it, will never need it. I mean, my grandfather had a saying. He said, well, you might as well go outside and kiss a chicken's butt in high wind. All you're going to get is crap on your face. He wasn't kidding. The things your grandparents say, right?
Yes, exactly. And I wonder if they say those things just to needle the parents a bit.
I don't know. He was a small man. He was the size of a jockey, but I remember you didn't mess with him. I remember that he had a mule that didn't want to do what he wanted to do, and he knocked it right down. He punched that mule right between the eyes. So anytime after he would say, Denise, I'd say, yes, sir. I was the end of that.
Yes,
I didn't want to get hit like he hit that mule.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that, and as you know, that's what we're talking about is the key to entrepreneurship too. I mean, if you've been at it for a while, I think people I'd like to think most people start realizing it. If you want to start a new business, what's the first question you need to answer? And it's really not how am I going to make money or how am I going to make a profit. Right. It's what can I do for somebody else that's either better or that they're not getting now that'll help them. And there's no point talking about profits and costs and whatnot until you figure out what it is you're going to do for somebody else. And people lose sight of that. You run into people who are trying to figure out how to start a business that will make them money. And, I believe in that sort of thing, but you've got to start with what am I going to do for somebody else? That's better, much better than what they're getting now.
Exactly right. And I'm trying to think what the quote, it's a very famous quote from Zig Ziglar. You can have everything in life you want if you just if you help other people, and I'm paraphrasing, get what they want. And that's really the essence of sales, whether you're trying to sell your 3-year-old on putting on his clothes and going outside, or you're trying to sell yourself into putting on your clothes and going outside. It doesn't matter. But we all have to have these conversations, and we all have to really, in my case anyway, really mean what I'm saying. Because I don't know about you. I mean, I'm a fence sitter when I want to be. My mother used to say that I could have been an attorney. I can, talk out of both sides of my mouth and win both arguments. I can always talk myself out of doing something quicker than I can out of doing something. I think we're all like that to some degree.
I think so. So yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, because we had a fascinating chat on the pre-interview a few weeks back, I think, and we were talking about exploring the power of active hope. Let's talk about active hope and its significance in today's world, because I've said this before on this show, particularly since COVID and even a little bit before that. It just seemed to me, and still seems to me, that the entire world is operating under, I don't know, a low-level sense of dread. We just, too much news, too much bad news. We're walking around going, oh, geez, oh, geez, oh, geez. So let's talk about hope instead.
I'd love to. I think you're right on. There's so much negativity around, and we do. Let's face it, we do face serious problems. I mean, I don't want to deny that. We do face problems, but we also face huge opportunities, and I think we lose sight of the opportunities while we're talking about the problems. We live in a time where there's just so much potential if only we can get our act together. And I think we need to focus more on that. I know a few people do, but not enough. And we talked about hope, the role of entrepreneurs in hope, and of course, entrepreneurs in some ways are the carriers of hope. I mean, it's hard to be an entrepreneur if you don't have a strong sense of hope, I think. But also, it's the entrepreneurs that are oftentimes the ones looking forward and looking towards the opportunities. I think that's important for society. And of course, it's not just the formal entrepreneurs, the people who actually start businesses, but I'm talking about, there's also the sense of entrepreneurship within organizations that I think ties in. That sometimes I think of it as the spirit of enterprise. What's that forward-looking sense that we're going to create a better world in the process? And I think that's so important. And if I could dig into hope a little bit more, sometimes we think of hope and optimism as synonyms, but I don't think that's quite right. Optimism.
And it's not a woo-woo thing at all. I mean, a lot of people, oh, come on now, you can't really manifest anything. You can't think it into being. We are what we think. I will argue all day long about that. We are what we think. If, when you had asked me in the pre-interview, hey, Denise, how are you doing? And I told you that I had a raging headache and that I was cranky, you wouldn't be on here today. You would have said, oh, I don't like her. You would have left. But the thing is, once I caught myself thinking, man, I've got a headache, I instantly took steps to alleviate. I drank water, grabbed some aspirin, took some deep breaths, and told myself, I don't have a headache. And I didn't because I convinced myself that I was just perfectly fine. And I was.
Yeah, I'll try that next time I have a headache.
Try it. It works.
Yeah. Usually, I try to remember that it's not going to last forever. But there's a difference between hope and optimism. I think optimism is kind of I think of optimism as sort of a general disposition that things are going to work out, that kind of thing. Hope. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat this morning. Sorry. Hope is focused really more on a specific favorable outcome. Like we may say, I hope to get the new job, or I hope the customer is going to say yes. It's focused on a particular specific outcome that is plausible. It's not certain, it's not guaranteed, but it's at least plausible. And I think that's an important distinction. I think we can also distinguish between passive hope and active hope. Passive hope
doing something about it. Being smart and making sure that what you're delivering is what this person needs or wants.
with passive hope, it's we're waiting and hoping something specific good is going to happen. With active hope, we're actually working towards something, and I think active hope is the one we should focus on. The late Chris Snyder did a bunch of research on it, really seminal research. He interviewed and studied a whole bunch of what he called high hope individuals. So he talked about hope. He was really talking about active hope. And what he found was that high hope individuals have think of hope or behave as though hope is really contains three components. You've got the positive outcome that you're hoping for. That's your goal. You've got a pathway to get there, or you've identified a pathway to get there, and you've got the will to pursue that pathway. And it really takes all three. And when you think about it, I think that's important. It's not just your desire for the favorable outcome and thinking you want to move in that direction. It's also identifying the pathway and then having the will and the resilience and the persistence to follow that path. Two of his colleagues who work with him, Jennifer Chevins and David Feldman, developed this further into what they call hope therapy. And as they researched, they found that all three of these characteristics can be developed. And I think that's the important thing. We can develop a better sense of what the outcome is we're looking for, and make it less general, and really think through what it is that we'd like to achieve. We can also work harder at developing the pathway to get there. One of the aspects of that is, high hope individuals tend to develop multiple pathways. So if one doesn't work, they're able to develop another pathway to get there. But they're persistent about it, and they just don't give up when one pathway doesn't work out. Or, obstacle comes up. High hope individuals are better able to figure out a way around that obstacle and not give up. And then, of course, we can develop the will and the persistence to get there. Some of that has to do with practice. Some of it has to do with reminding ourselves that we can make it work. I think so. Active hope can be developed, and I think that's important. I think I'd like to see us in a situation where more people really worked at developing a sense of active hope containing all three components. The objective, the pathways to get there, and the willingness to pursue the pathway. I think it's better for entrepreneurs to think that way. I also think it'd be better for the world if more of us thought that way. So we're focusing on the goal, the positive elements, and we're taking the steps necessary to get there.
And I love that you're tying that into entrepreneurship, and because that's exactly how I operate. And all my friends who are entrepreneurs, it just doesn't occur to us that we can fail. We know we will. I mean, we're not stupid. We know we will. And we know we'll probably fail at some point, some touch point, multiple times each day. But we get up, we brush ourselves off, and we say, well, that didn't work. Okay. And instantly, we've got two more ideas. We're going, okay, let me go try this. That's a long, involved way of saying we have cast iron stomachs, and we just don't know when to quit. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes you do change your goals. And high hope individuals are able to reframe their objectives if they really can't meet the objective they've set for themselves. That's part of it. I think there's also a spiritual side to it, I think. I think our spiritual practices, if we feel that sense of spiritual connection or that sense that we're doing the right thing, I think that's important. I'm not aware that Snyder and the others talked about that, but usually if somebody feels like they're doing the right thing, that they're, a religious person might say that I'm doing the will of God. that I'm moving in the direction that I'm supposed to be moving in. I think that can be important for developing hope. It's certainly important for developing a sense of resilience and persistence. Spiritual practices that people engage in, like prayer and things like that, can help. They help us stay connected. But they can also help us calm down and focus, I think. And I think that's important. So that I think there is a spiritual dimension to hope, and particularly hope and entrepreneurship that for a lot of people I think can be really, really important. And that's one of the areas I think our faith or our spirituality, your own faith or spirituality can help you deal with these issues.
It does. And I'm one of those people, and it took me a long time to kind of catch up with how I was thinking, but I'm one of those people that considers that every single breath is a prayer. It's a miracle. Mm-hmm. And I don't take any of that lightly.
Yes. Yeah, and that moment-by-moment sense of appreciation can be so important.
It is. Some years ago, and I'm one of those people, I'm an A-type personality. I'm trying to get down to maybe B+. I'm trying to calm it down a little bit. But it's not going to work. But still, I was born an A-type personality. And I'm busy all the time. My brain is, when I say busy, I don't mean I'm running around racing. I spend a lot of downtime thinking, reading, absorbing, then doing some more thinking, talking to my spirits, talking to God, talking to my subconscious. I do a lot of chatting, talk to the cats. But it took me the longest kind of time to understand that what I was lacking and not paying a bit of attention to was gratitude. I just thought, well, I'm good. And I did not have a gratitude practice. But once I started that, life changed. It really did.
Mm. And, in the field of positive psychology, that's one of the things they found is really important, is that gratitude practice.
And I'll tell you how I discovered that I wasn't doing it. This is many years ago now. This podcast is 15 years old, so I've talked with a lot of people. And there was a gentleman probably over 10 years ago, at least a decade or better, and he had recovered from some bad, cancer. He had some big things going on in his body where he was just basically told, sit down, shut up, you're going to die. And he didn't like that. So he would tell anybody who would listen, he cured himself. Yeah, he went to his doctors. He did what he felt was right, in terms of his care. He didn't do everything they wanted, but he did a lot of it. And he said gratitude became every breath he took. As far as I know, he is still fine.
Oh, boy.
Oh. And when I heard him say that, I'm not often speechless, but I was. And so now, instead of, jumping out of bed first thing in the morning, and like my mom would say, the devil says, oh, shoot, she's awake. Ah! What are we going to do now? But I know. But now I will deliberately, and I don't even have to think about it anymore, but I will wake up, open my eyes, shift the cat off my bladder so I can stay down for a little while, and start to speak my gratitude out loud. Because to me, and this is just personal to me, when you're thinking something, it's a highway in there. You know this. You've got 14 different thoughts intersecting. A car just crashed into the mailbox out front. You can't think a single thought, but you can speak it out loud and keep it focused. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of talking to my ceiling fan.
Do you speak the gratitude out loud?
Oh, yes, absolutely. To my ceiling fan. I'm looking up at the ceiling fan the whole time.
I think I would guess that speaking it out loud is an important part of it for you.
It's very important because, like I said, if I'm thinking, who knows? It's like I'm on a super highway and I don't know what direction I'm going in, and too many people are cutting in front of me. It's a mess. You just have too many things going on in your head. Speaking it out loud, you can focus on the sentence, on the thought, on the prayer. It makes a big difference. I
think that's an important idea. I'm going to remember that. I tend to pray silently, and
well,
but
I
you're right.
do.
When you speak it out loud.
Yeah, when you speak it out loud, you can hear it. The ceiling fan can hear it. Your spirits hear it. Listen, you're going to think I'm a lunatic, but when I get in my car, I will deliberately, I get in the car, I pat my steering wheel because I love my car, and I have a spirit that I call Jeeves, and he goes with me, and I tell him what I want. I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. I would like for my tires to remain inflated, the engine to run, and the local constabulary to not spot me. And I go where I'm going. I get there, and I get back safe and sound. Thank you, Jeeves.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm speaking it out loud. I know it sounds lunatic, but you know what? Nothing ever happens to me on the road. I always get the best spots, and I don't get a ticket. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I don't always get the best spots, but I haven't had a ticket in a while or something.
Me either, and I'm going to keep it that way. I was like, nope,
Yeah.
it wasn't. I'm invisible. Remember, Jeeves? I'm invisible.
Good. So, did what I say about hope make sense?
It does. And without hope, we all know what happens when there is no hope.
Yeah.
The world just gets dark. Yeah. It gets ugly. It gets heavy. It gets infected. Without hope, you really got nothing much. So how do you find hope? I mean, let's just go back to, work. You're in a position where you really are miserable. And we talked a bit about reframing it. But are there any other things that they can do to kind of reclaim their hope? Maybe in the people around them, the boss. Maybe their car was running properly today. Where do they find hope? And then expand on it.
Yeah. I would say, there's different ways, and I don't really like giving people advice because I don't know their situation, and I've got my own problems, my own shortcomings, and I'm not sure I'm in a position to give a lot of advice, but a couple of things to think about. At some point it's good to focus on what do you want to have happen. Focus on your objective and how you might get there. If we spend too much time focusing on why we're miserable and why all the problems, we can lose sight of what it is, what direction we're trying to move in. Part of it's spiritual. Part of it's accepting that this is where I am, and there's a greater reality that we don't understand maybe, and there's more to the world than we see, or more to reality than we see, but it's hard because some people are in really, really difficult situations. So I really hesitate to talk about it because it seems it would feel kind of presumptuous to try to make it sound like a pep talk. If we're talking about people who really are in dark places.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, I kind of hesitate to answer the question because it just seems presumptuous to other people's situations that I don't really understand. But I do think for people in general, it helps to be thinking about where it is that you want to go. What do you want to contribute? How do you want to make this a better world? How can you take your situation and make it better for people, especially make it better for others as well? If you're in a business setting, for example, where people are pretty glum about prospects, what can you do to help other people? What can you do to offer some encouragement to other people? How can you help others through the process? I think in a lot of cases that can help. Teresa Amabile, who's a social psychologist who's done a lot of work. She's she spent the last 20 or 30 years as a professor at the Harvard Business School. In her book, The Progress Principle, it talks about the inner life of work. And for years she's been saying I'm not sure she's always used the inner life of work term, but that people are more productive and more creative when they have a more positive inner work life. And I think I'm conveying this accurately, that one of the things that matters a lot is whether or not people feel like they've accomplished something toward whether or not they've had a meaningful accomplishment that day. And it can be a small accomplishment. It doesn't have to be very big, but just something where they made a contribution, they moved things forward, they have a sense that, they did something that contributed. And I think that's so important. But she goes on to say, and I think this is what I point to. She says other people can help a lot. And of course that can be your boss, or it could be a coworker, or it could be a customer or supplier, I suppose. She talks about there being two kinds of I guess people that can help. One she calls a catalyst, and that's somebody who will, if you're having a problem or you're trying to get something done, that'll be somebody that offers some help of some sort. It doesn't have to be a lot of help, but let's say that you're having trouble getting the information you need to perform a task. It might be the person who hears that and says, well, I'll make a phone call for you. Or here's somebody who can help you, and I'll help you get in touch with them. Or here's some information that I found that might help, that kind of thing. There's also what she calls nourishers, and that's the person that, sees that you did something well, for example, or you're working hard at something, and they notice it, and they express their appreciation for it. And so it's nourishing. I mean, that helps. And I think looking for opportunities to do that for other people, both as a catalyst and as a nourisher, can really help other people enjoy their work more, be happier, be more hopeful. And I think it helps us too, as we do it for others. So there's those kinds of things.
Right. And it doesn't have to just be in the workplace. A kind word or a, hey, how are you doing? I'm in the South. You cannot walk outside with somebody saying, hey, how are you doing? How's your mom and them? Oh, geez, off we go. But this happened to me years ago, and I've never forgotten it because I am an introvert. When I go outside, when I actually have to go out among people, and more than 3 people is just 2 people from me. After about 59 and 3/4 minutes, I got to go. I'm going home. But, I'll put on my black baseball cap and my biggest Ray-Bans, and I'm trying to, be invisible. It doesn't work. People will always notice you. But I remember years ago being in line at the grocery store, and I just wanted to go home. I was peopled out. And I looked in front of me, and this elderly lady, she was probably in her late 70s, early 80s. She was beautiful. And she reminded me of my mom, what I thought my mom would look like when she got older, and it turns out she did. But tiny, beautifully dressed. She had a manicure, she had a pedicure, and she had the cutest, sparkly sandals on. And all I said was, I love your shoes. We talked for an hour. We both checked out. We moved over to where the buggies go. In the Deep South, they're called buggies. Y'all may call them carts. We talked for an hour. I've never forgotten her. I've never seen her before or since, but it made her day and mine. It can be that simple. Yeah,
it really can be. And, that's in our work lives and anywhere else, I think that sort of thing's really important. And, I forget that lesson frequently, but it's when that sounds like a beautiful experience. I can imagine it stayed with you and her.
Well, it did, and she was a beautiful little Cajun lady, and she was telling me stories because here in Cajun country, you can listen to 14 people in one grocery store and hear 14 different accents because each little town has their own individual accent. And it's fascinating the stories that they can tell. I mean, I could really have talked with her all day, but we were standing up. We were both getting tired. I know she was. And, I mean, I don't even know. It was over a decade ago. Again, I've never forgotten that lady and how she made me feel.
And, you know, in the workplace, we're still people. And so
exactly. That's my point.
In the workplace.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you may not be able to talk for an hour with somebody in the middle of the morning when everybody's trying to get things done, but still, you know, we can still be people, and you know, those things are so important, I think.
They really are. And, you know, little things like that can stay with you for the day, or in my case, a decade or better. Listen, I'm back in the book. I'm on page 141, and you talk about the Dick and Duffy framework. And these are our names, Brian Dick and Ryan Duffy, and they're psychologists.
Yeah.
You talk about how they can make your job a calling, how the psychology of vocation can change your life at work. And I think that's really what we're trying to get at today.
Yeah, and they've done really good work on the subject of finding your calling. I'll give a little bit of background. Robert Bellah, who's a sociologist, wrote a book in the late 80s, and he set up a framework for understanding how people see their work that has been adopted by quite a few others. The idea is that people can either see their work as a job, in which case they exchange their money their time and their talent for money, and it's basically a transaction. They can see it as a career, in which case they're dedicated to a particular, I guess you'd say, domain or subject area, I guess, and they expect to progress in terms of responsibility and challenge and status, or position at least, as they go through their career. Or they can see it as a calling, in which case it means something deeply personal to them, and it seems to contribute to, I guess you'd say, broader society in some ways, or at least they feel that it does. And in other work, people have found that when you describe those three categories, people can very readily tell you what category their work falls into. And interestingly, I mean, sometimes people think, well, for a person to have a calling, they have to be at a certain economic level or a certain education level or something. But in fact, it really cuts across different socioeconomic levels. And they found studies that have found that it's not just people in the better jobs that have a calling. People in all kinds of jobs can have a sense that their work is a calling. There's the traditionally, calling has been considered a religious concept, and for most people, it still is. You're called by God, or usually people think of it. You're called by God in a particular direction to do a particular type of work or play a particular type of role. There's also a more secular approach, which is more recent, which is the idea this is something that feels like I was meant to do. It seems to come from inside. Brian Dick and Ryan Duffy, through their research, have posed that the way to think about it, the way to bring it together, is that for most people, a calling has really three elements. One is it feels like summons from beyond. Most people would say from God, but others, there are people who think of it some other way, but it feels like we're being summoned to something, number one. Number two, it's something that has deep personal significance to us. And number three, it's other-oriented in the sense that we're trying to do something that contributes to other people or the greater good. The only thing I would add to that, I think, is that I think it's very important for it to be something that feels like that matches our inner values, our inner drives, our inner intuitions. There has to be at least an element that seems to come from within, I think. Otherwise, we're more subject to being burned out. And so that's the way I think of it. People find their calling in different ways. Dick and Duffy advocate what they describe as active discernment. For most people, having a sense of calling is not a sudden kind of thing. It's not a bolt out of the blue or a sudden spiritual experience that sets you on your course for your life. For most people, it develops over time. And it's a matter of trial and error. We try this, we try that. We start developing a sense for what seems to fit with us, for what direction it seems like the right way for us to go. We might listen to the comments of other people. We may find that we're in a particular type of job, and there's an aspect of it that we really like, and other aspects that we don't. Well, that's an important clue. But I guess my argument is that it can also be a lifetime process, a lifelong process where we're continually moving towards a sense of calling, developing over time, and maybe that's part of that's part of the joy of the process, I guess I'd say. But I also think things like prayer and meditation and other spiritual practices can help us. We have an experience. We try something. And then we reflect on it, or maybe we pray about it, or we meditate about it, or we just sit in a room and with our thoughts and our intuitions. But maybe it's a combination of the practice itself, the work itself, the activity itself, and then a sense of reflection on it, or maybe prayer about it. And over time, I think a sense of calling can develop. That's the way I see it. Are there downsides to a calling? I don't think I'm skeptical that there are downsides to a true calling. But some people have suggested that, if we become too inflexible about it, then we can't adjust to changes well enough. There needs to be a certain amount of flexibility in our approach. I think that's probably right.
As you mentioned earlier, we're growing into it. A calling, like any other thing, is not something you can say at 7:00 on Saturday night. Okay, I'm done. I got it. It's all done.
Yeah.
Now what? I mean, it doesn't work like that. Well, I've got you for a few more minutes.
For most people.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Somebody might have that experience, but most people don't.
Not me.
My
attitude, my plan is that I'm going to pass away in my sleep at around 100, 120, somewhere in that range. And just before I go to sleep, I'm still going to be plotting world domination. I'm not quitting. Just so you know. But I wanted to ask you about your involvement with nonprofit organizations that are focused on the intersection of faith and in work, because you do a lot of this, and you're dedicated to inspiring others in their vocational journeys. So we've got about 4 more minutes, so let's touch on that a bit.
Yeah. I launched I have worked with other nonprofits, but I launched a nonprofit called the Center for Faith and Enterprise with the help of several other entrepreneurs. We try to find ways to help people connect their own faith or spirituality with their work in ways that supports them in their work. And I emphasize their own faith or spirituality. In my view, our faith or spirituality can really play an important role in helping us as we work. It may not be the primary purpose of our faith or spirituality. I mean, obviously, we want to connect with God and the divine mystery, but that may be the goal. I think that can also help us in the workplace. Things like prayer and other spiritual practices can help us deal with stress and conflict and keep us calm and help us develop a sense of mission over time. Our religious traditions can offer a lot of wisdom. I mean, I can't speak. I've done some reading in other religions, but I really don't feel qualified to speak about them. But I can speak from a Christian perspective. The Bible is a collection of people dealing with these important issues for 3,000-4,000 years, and so you can find wisdom in it that I think is important. So I think a person's faith and spirituality really can help them. The practices, dealing with problems, helping them develop a sense of mission and purpose, developing character strengths, and so it's not an easy subject. So we've done a lot of experimenting. The book came out of a lot of experimenting. I've interviewed a lot of people, tried to get the thinking of a lot of other people. We've had speaker programs, we've run retreats and other things involving spiritual practices, and so it's a work in progress, and we're still very much experimenting to see what seems to help people the most. I think a big thing that's often neglected, I think, when we talk about faith and spirituality and its connection with work is I think it's important for people to be affirmed in their work. And especially see how their faith or their spirituality values what they're doing and the contribution they're making. Have jobs which, when they think about it, really do make a contribution to the greater good and the well-being of other people. And I think our religious institutions really help them see that and understand and appreciate them for it. And so that's a big part of my focus. Your work really does matter.
It does. And you were talking about experiment. Look, as far as I'm concerned, I've always thought this, even when I was young and arrogant. Well, more arrogant than I am now. Yep. But life really is a big experiment. I mean, we don't know anything for sure, but we can test the waters. We can say, oh, that was good. Don't do that again. So, and we'd haven't mentioned I really rely on my intuition and my gut. I really do, and my subconscious. So, I'm paying attention to what the downloads are that are going into my head and, my brain and my spirit. So I pay attention to that too. Rob, before I let you go, tell people, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your company. So where can people find you online, and what's your preferred means of contact?
My website is faithandenterprise.org. And is spelled out, faithandenterprise.org. You can go there. There's an email link there. People can contact me. There's also a link they can, set up a telephone call, and I'm happy to talk to people because I always like hearing people's experiences. That's how I learn, and that's very important to me. So, if you want to talk over your experiences at work, give me, go to my website, and we'll talk on the phone or by email, and that's the best lead.
Perfect. And the book, The Sacred Meaning of Everyday Work, I believe is available on Amazon.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Amazon has the print version and the Kindle version. Barnes & Noble just has the paperback version.
Right. Which I happen to have in my entrepreneurial library right now. And thank you. Listen, Rob, as we end today's episode, I really appreciate you being here. And to the audience, if you found our insights helpful, and go find Rob. He just gave you the information on how to connect with him. And if you enjoyed the show, please support us by reviewing and rating on iTunes. Your feedback is critical to my mission to inspire and empower more individuals. So don't forget to subscribe, review, and share your part in Success Radio. Thank you for tuning in. Rob, again, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Denise. Thank you. I'd like to say one final thing.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.